So let's talk about the other couloirs under the Saulire in Courchevel.
Do you like 150 Days of Winter?
But you are the YouTuber. You've always been the YouTuber.
I think you did a good job.
Now, if you follow my channel, you'll know that every year I make a little compilation video of all the little lemmings skiing down the Grand Couloir. And it's all very light-hearted. We go and make comments or whatever like that. But in the end, it seems, at least judging by the videos that are on YouTube, that that's the only couloir that anybody actually skis down, and that's such a shame. So what would be better than to have a look at the alternatives that are available? Just so you know that this list is, we're going to put these in the order of the distance from the top of Saulire. Unsurprisingly, by the name, the first couloir we come to is called the Sous Le Telepherique, which in English means under the telepherique. Very cryptic. Now, if you look at the first couloir, it actually can really be divided into about 3 different chutes, each one divided by rocks. The right-hand one is probably the widest and has seen some of the craziest runs, including, I believe, including one of the locals who actually jumped from the terrace of one of the buildings above down directly into the couloir. Absolutely bonkers. I would not recommend that for the beginner. But despite this first couloir, I think it really gets skied, regardless of the fact that everyone who goes onto the Grand Couloir, they ski down the path, which of course is very narrow, and what's the first thing they look at? They stop halfway down the path, look to their right, and what do they look at? They look at the Sous Le Telepherique couloir. But they never ski it. You know, it's about 30 to 45 degrees, much like most of the couloirs are in this region. Now, when I was looking for footage of people skiing this in 1999, they held a free ride competition down this couloir, and there's a great shot from that. And in 2001, the Pat Sharples hosted the Pat Sharples Free Ride Invitational, which is down there. Again, this is before video cameras, but even then you can see that there are some great shots of people coming down. But most people more recently will recognize that this is where, of course, Candide Tuvex made this couloir look like a blue run when he skied down it about 6 years ago. And when you look at this, the speed and the way he goes off each of the rocks is mind-blowing. And of course, what would it be without a backflip at the end before he comes back down onto the main piste below? But moving on to the second couloir, which of course doesn't actually go down to Courchevel. This one goes down to Mirabel. This has changed names over the years. It was called the GoPro Couloir, and it's now called the Tournier Couloir. I'm unaware the name Tournier is synonymous with Courchevel. It's his own personal little monopoly board. This couloir goes down the other side of the mountain and goes underneath the Saulire Express bubble, which comes up from Mirabel. Now, as you head down the path, you cut immediately to the left for a 500-meter descent. By the netting at the top, it's quite often bare due to wind. Because of this, the top section becomes really quite narrow before eventually opening up. This is quite well skied with obvious little moguls. Nothing quite like the Grand Couloir moguls, but be warned, if you do try this, you will have an audience of everybody who's watching on the ascending bubbles, who will see every mistake that you make. Now, going back to the Courchevel side, we have the Emile Couloir, which I covered very briefly in my past video about the Grand Couloir. There were some people who put a video saying we skied the Grand Couloir, and of course they did two-thirds of it, but then they headed off down the Emile. If you're wondering who this gentleman is, he was skiing director in Courchevel in the 50s, and I think he was an ex-French ski racer as well. And as you can see from this photo, a very dashing gentleman. Again, not very heavily skied, but great for steep practice. You will, of course, to get there, you will have to go down, ski the path for the Grand Couloir and do the first bowl. But then you immediately take instead of going down the steep section of the Grand Couloir, you then take a right-hand turn, and you're greeted by a very rarely skied run. There is a big old Gazex there, but it's great for practicing on steeper terrain. And of course, the next one we're not going to talk about, it's the Grand Couloir. And because, of course, I make all these other videos about the Grand Couloir, we are not going to talk about it. Okay? Suffice to say, yes, Grand Couloir, reputation, blur, boring, overskied, whatever. We move on to the next one. And this, of course, has several different names. For me, it is called the Petit Couloir, because it's right next to the Grand Couloir, okay? And of course, this is probably the first couloir where I recommend a guide, as it involves removing your skis and doing a short hike. After fresh snow, skiers with their hard boots have a definite advantage until a path has been made by several people. When you get there, you are rewarded by something as steep as the Grand Couloir, but without the bumps. And as you can see, it is also much narrower. It's not scary narrow, but again, Grand Couloir is that, Petit Couloir is that. That is why it's called Petit Couloir. You basically head down to the Grand Couloir, but instead of doing the final part of the Grand Couloir, if you basically stick to the left-hand side and you traverse as far across as you get before you get to the rock, and hopefully if you're not the first person after a storm, you'll be able to see path where other people have gone, and again, skis off, skis on the shoulder. Now, of course, finally, we have, again, a couloir of many different names, but this is called the Dog Leg Couloir. This is an extension of going to the Petit Couloir. Once you get into the Petit Couloir, instead of putting your skis on, you can continue to hike up and across to the next couloir. Back in 1997, I skied this by accident, and I know that might sound a bit strange, but a much better skier asked me if I wanted to ski one of the couloirs, and of course this was my first season in resort, so I was like, what the hell, and I went along. By the time I actually got to the top, I was exhausted, okay? And again, I remember being slightly told off by the other skier that he had to get home to work, and I felt slightly guilty that I slowed him down. But despite in those days with my skinny skis, I managed to put some half decent turns in on some absolutely great snow. But again, there is a lot of hiking that goes on that one, and so there you have it. Saulire's couloirs are a lot more than just the Grand Couloir. As always, if you'd enjoyed content like this, click the old subscribe button, click the like button. If you have any comments, please leave them down below, and on that, I will see you all in the next video. Ciao.